Hi and welcome to my second dev diary for the Collage Atlas. The first dev diary I did was specifically about the art and the kind of methods involved in making the game. There'll be a link down below, so please do check that out if you've missed it. This video specifically, I'm going to be talking about three different things. You mightn't be interested in all of them, so I'm going to put links in the description so you can jump to the section that you want to hear about. Basically, the three things I want to talk about are the themes of the game, like what really is it I'm trying to, what subjects I'm trying to talk about with the game. I'm going to be talking about the, I think the world building aspect as well, and the motivations behind the world building and why I'm doing it in the way that I am. And so I'll be shouting out a lot of games that basically I think do that incredibly well. And thirdly, and this may or may not interest you, I don't really know, will be influences. I'm going to shout out, I think, 4 incredibly influential artists and writers, how they've kind of fed into my work, and actually use it as an excuse to recommend some books that really mean a lot to me that I hope you'll check out. So let's get started. So what are the themes of the game? What are the themes of the Collage Atlas? What's it actually about? I mean, in general terms, really the game's about hope. It's about agency, and it's about exploring memory and what memory can mean to us, both in kind of positive and kind of negative ways. So for me, the hope and the agency aspects are very tightly entwined. One of the things that can happen when we experience very challenging times in our lives, or actually very traumatic events, is that our sense of agency, our sense of actually having a meaningful level of control over our day-to-day can be completely undermined. And that can actually obviously affect your sense of kind of hope or hopelessness, So with the mechanics of this game, I'm really seeking to constantly reassure and reestablish that sense of agency within this space. So your presence in the game matters. Your proximity to things matters. Your line of sight, your gaze is actually a really potent tool at your disposal. It's all about reassuring you that you have a meaningful control over your experience of the world just by being there. So one of the most important things for me when I've been developing this game is that whilst I'm feeding into it, my own experiences and that kind of thing, I don't at all really want it to be prescriptive in terms of its message. And I also certainly don't want it to come across as an entirely autobiographical work. I don't think that really would be tremendously helpful. And my favourite games, my favourite films, my favourite books, my favourite music, they're all largely incomplete. They're kinds of things that actively encourage the audience to step into them, to actually kind of complete the work. They tend to be things that deal with universal themes. So naturally, that was the ambition here, to make a game that that deals with universal themes, and hopefully, as a player, you'll be able to really make it your own. And hopefully it'll be more useful to you because of that. So now I'd like to talk about the game, the game's motivations, more in a kind of purely design sense. And basically, I've long been a fan of games where the world, the environment, is actually essentially like a main character in its own right. So you might well have the protagonist, the character that you're charging around with, but the actual worlds are that distinct and that memorable that they stand alone. Some of the ones that have always stuck with me are things like just the castle in Mario 64. Not the levels, but this actual hub space. I almost consider it like the star of the game, really, for me. And strangely, whilst there's no real thematic relationship between my game and Grand Theft Auto, Vice City's always been a big thing to me, because that city and the beaches, of course, and all this kind of stuff, they're actually the things that really kind of stuck with me. I wasn't so enamored with the regular Grand Theft Auto-y kind of stuff, but that world meant a lot to me. And similarly, I mean, for me, games like Outrun, Outrun 2006, one of my favourite games ever. I don't drive. I really don't care about cars, even slightly. But driving through those environments was the really potent thing. And the only way you can visit those environments is by going in a car, unfortunately. So for me, with the Collage Atlas, I wanted to make a world that stands alone, that like I really hope feels like a character in its own right. And I wanted to make a space that you just want to visit, you know. So there will be kind of puzzle elements, you know, light puzzling elements. And whilst there is a central narrative as well, I want the space to be inviting enough that sometimes you might just fire it up just because you just want to go there for a little bit. Okay, so this is probably the bit of the video that I was actually most looking forward to recording. I now get to talk about influences and the artists that basically really excite me. And in some ways have kind of either directly or indirectly kind of spurred me on to make this game in the first place. You're going to have to excuse my pronunciation because some of these names are a bit difficult for me, given that I've actually never heard them said out loud. So anyway, so to start with, I want to talk about a painter called Naoisa Inoue. He's actually done some work with Studio Ghibli, so I think he did some background work in Whisper of the Heart, maybe. I really should have double-checked that before the video. But anyway, his paintings are absolutely incredible. And I'd long been drawing various kind of scenes and whatnot that started to feel like they were, broadly speaking, related. They were all part of the same world. This is long before this game started. But in many ways, I thought, like, is this redundant? Is there any real point in constantly drawing disparate scenes that actually kind of are all of the same place, but without any, I don't know, any reason to explore it further? Does that make sense? And then I came across Naoisa Inoue's work, and his life work is actually, he's been painting this same imaginary place for like decades, called Iblard. And I've actually got we've got some books here. I'm a huge fan of his. And he just paints these absolutely remarkable places. So I'll just show you a couple now. We have this. They're just absolute dreams. And actually, many of these places, I kind of felt like I'd like dreamt of them before I'd even come across his work. So that was really amazing to me. This is one of my favourite paintings, I think, of all time. The thing about some of these works is just there's a real sense of like peacefulness to them, which I really admire. They're very gentle, and as I say, the idea of just slowly building a world over decades made it feel less ridiculous to me that I had been slowly building a world just for a handful of years. So that spurred me on to work up my world of the Collage Atlas. Okay, next I want to talk about a really interesting character called Gustav Mesmer. This chap here, he actually lived a really tragic life, truth be told. He interrupted a communion ceremony, I think, when he was maybe a teenager, and basically announced that the wine that was being given out wasn't the blood of Christ. He ended up in a mental institution. He actually ended up in mental institutions for much of his life. I think he was actually around about retirement age when he came out. But what he did for his entire life regardless was he drew flying machines. He drew these fantastic flying machines. I'll show you a little bit now. So there he is, stood on a hill with his wings on there, and he produced hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these like completely impossible flying machines. You know, obviously they were never really gonna fly, but this wasn't what mattered, you know. It was about that kind of like insatiable kind of creative impulse. And there's just something about that absolute, persistence with an idea. I just found incredibly inspirational, you know. It gave me a lot of courage, I think, to pursue this singular idea of drawing an entire game world, which even now when I say it out loud just sounds like a really dumb thing to do. Just two more that I want to talk about. First of all, will be a name that's very familiar to a lot of you, an illustrator by the name of Maurice Sendak, obviously famed for Where the Wild Things Are, and a number of other incredibly high-profile books. I'd say children's books, but I actually think they're basically for everyone. But the book that's most important to me personally is this one here, called My Brother's Book. Now, this is just about one of the most kind of powerful books that I own, and one of the most powerful books I think I've ever read. The language is incredibly sparse. There's very little, but it's, as I say, incredibly powerful. It's basically is massive cry time, you know, the second you get through this thing. But what I really, really admire is how potent the kind of emotional thread is throughout it, whilst not getting bogged down with, like, you know, kind of word soup and everything. Naturally, when we kind of write about emotional things, it's very easy to kind of run away with ourselves and use more words than are entirely necessary. I, for one, definitely say things in a very roundabout way. And with the Collage Atlas, I really aspire to cut straight to the heart of things, if at all possible. You know, that's the aspiration anyway. To try and get across, you know, important things in as few words as I'm able. The last person I want to talk about is probably not even the slightest surprise, I think, to most people that know me, or it might even be quite apparent in my work. I don't really know. But my favourite writer is Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Forgive me, French people, for my horrendous pronunciation. And naturally, he's probably best known for, you know, The Little Prince, which is just a magical book. And again, it talks about universal themes, cuts to the heart of very, I think, kind of crucial human matters in very, very, very few words. But my personal favourite book of his is actually The Wind, Sand and Stars. This is an absolute state, actually, but that's because basically I read this book at least once a year, if not more. I dip into it all the time. There's just an awful lot that really speaks to me here. Although, unlike The Little Prince, this actually tells like a slightly more sprawling and semi-autobiographical story, but it touches on a lot of the similar kind of themes, things about our place in the universe, love, and I guess it's there's a lot of stuff about coming to terms with kind of growing up and that kind of thing in there, and staying in touch with like the more innocent side of yourself. But yeah, I won't witter on too much because, as I say, I imagine most people know who this is. And if you do, and you haven't read this, then please do. And if for some reason you've never read The Little Prince, then just stop watching this video right now and go and get it. It's very, very important. So thank you for sticking with me through that. Naturally, as in keeping with everything I do, I talked an awful lot more than I had originally intended, and it was a lot longer than I expected it would be. So yeah, thank you. If you want to continue to follow updates on the Collage Atlas, then please do check out the mailing list, which will be linked below. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, where I post regular GIFs and kind of interesting stuff. Also, as per usual, I should warn you that on Twitter I also do bang on about my houseplants quite a lot. So yeah, sorry about that. But there will be another Dev Diary coming up in the near future. I think I'm going to talk more about the music and that kind of thing, and hopefully have some details to share on like how I'm building the soundscapes, because actually whilst this game is, I hope, readily identifiable through its kind of like hand-drawn artwork, I'm putting a huge amount of work into the sound side of things as well. It means just as much to me as it does the visuals. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Well, I won't see you all because, you know, I can't see you, but, you know,